Hello everyone, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Is Europe about to freeze this coming winter? Question many analysts have contemplated given the dynamics taking place as Russia turned off the spigot while Qatar threatens to cut off gas deliveries to Europe. So, what is the old continent is going to do moving forward? My brief analysis is divided into 8 key points, but before I'll delve deeper into it, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification button so you will be notified every time I upload a new video, and thank you for your support. Number 1, gas crisis in Europe. The fallout of halting Russian supplies via Ukraine on New Year's Day, the Russian energy giant Gazprom announced the suspension of gas transit through Ukraine into Europe, marking a stark new chapter in an already tense relationship between Moscow and much of the European continent. This decision has far-reaching implications, as natural gas remains a critical energy source for many European Union countries. While the halt has been brewing for months aimed at shifting geopolitical dynamics, economic pressures, and backdrop of protracted conflict, it still came as a shock as to European capitals unaccustomed to such abrupt energy disruptions. Early signs of the fallout are already visible in Slovakia and Moldova, signaling that the gas crisis may accelerate and that Europe could be on the verge of another turbulent winter of high prices and energy shortages. Number 2, a long-brewing crisis. Europe's heavy reliance on Russian gas is no secret. For decades, pipelines running from Russia through Ukraine to Europe have been a cornerstone of the continent's energy security and economic development. Although newer routes and suppliers have emerged over time, such as liquefied natural gas from the United States, of course at a higher price, if I may add, or pipeline gas from Norway, which is limited by the way, Russian natural gas has remained a significant component of Europe's energy mix. Even amid political tensions, major crises, and sanctions, the energy relationship between Russia and Europe persisted because both sides reaped substantial benefits. Russia needed revenues from gas exports, and Europe needed the relatively low-cost, stable supply of Russian energy. Yet, this equilibrium has been eroding in recent years due to Europe's policies. Heightened tensions over Ukraine, which was orchestrated by the US, have fundamentally altered the geopolitical landscape. As European leaders have ignorantly sought to reduce their dependence on Russian resources, Moscow, on the other hand, has explored alternative markets, particularly ones in Asia, and new transit routes that bypass Ukraine. The freezing of Russian assets and sanctions imposed by Western nations have spurred Russia to look for ways to tighten its control over the flow of energy to Europe. And rightly so. Against this backdrop, the final decision to hold gas transit through Ukraine is not entirely surprising, though its suddenness caught many by surprise. It comes on the heels of Qatar warning Europe that it will stop its deliveries of gas if Europe moves forward with penalizing Qatar. Interesting dynamics. Number 3, immediate repercussions in Slovakia and Moldova. The cessation of Russian gas transit has already triggered significant alarm in Slovakia. As a landlocked nation, heavily reliant on energy import, Slovakia has few immediate alternatives to fill the gap left by the abrupt cutoff. Reports indicate mounting concern among Slovak officials over potentially soaring energy costs for households and industries alike. Although Slovakia can tap into shared European storage facilities and partially diversify through interconnections with neighboring countries, these measures may not be sufficient to stave off shortages if the crisis deepens, which most likely it will, especially during the winter heating season when demand typically peaks. Moldova, which traditionally relies on Ukrainian pipelines for much of its gas, now finds itself in an even more precarious situation. The Moldovan government was already grappling with a high inflation and economic pressures linked to the European Union's failed policies and regional upheaval. With the interruption of supplies via Ukraine, Moldovan households and businesses face an immediate threat of insufficient heating fuel, prompting the government to explore emergency measures. Good luck with that. Discussions are underway about seeking alternative energy sources, potentially from Romania or other European Union partners, but such arrangements often take time to set up, leaving vulnerable populations at risk of real hardships in the near term. Number 4, reactions and a broader impact across Europe. News of the halted gas transit reverberated throughout the European Union. Energy ministers convened urgent meetings to evaluate the severity of the disruption and assess their emergency reserves. Yet, they failed to address the real issue at heart, blindly following US policies and dictates. In Brussels, officials reiterated the need for solidarity mechanisms. Here we go again, with more slogans among member states, whereby countries with more robust storage or alternative supply routes can assist those more acutely affected. Good luck with that. The timing could hardly be worse. Europe's energy system has already been under strain amid global supply chain disruptions, volatility in energy markets, and ongoing inflationary pressures. Public sentiment has been sensitive to spikes in electricity and heating bills, raising the specter of social unrest prices soar again. Ask the Germans, the Dutch, the French, the Italians, among others. The abrupt stoppage of Russian gas transiting through Ukraine could exacerbate existing stress on the system, just as temperatures drop in the heart of winter. Meanwhile, energy analysts warn that the crisis extends beyond immediate scarcity or skyrocketing prices. The sudden cutoff signals Russia's willingness to use energy supplies as a political lever, reinforcing perceptions that it views gas and oil not merely as economic commodities, but as strategic tools. European leaders must weigh urgent short-term needs, such as keeping the lights on and heating homes, against the longer-term imperative of safeguarding the region's energy independence. Once again, good luck with that. European leaders thinking rationally after what we witnessed in the last 2 years. I just don't see that. Number 5, seeking alternatives. Even before this latest disruption, several European nations had begun to accelerate their pivot away from Russian gas, if they can afford it, of course. Germany, for instance, turned to new liquefied natural gas terminals, forging imports deals with suppliers ranging from the United States, of course at a much higher price, to Qatar. Poland invested heavily in LNG infrastructure and interconnectors, linking it to neighboring countries. Others, like Italy and Spain, explored ramping up pipeline projects from North Africa or further tapping into renewables. Yet these efforts, while meaningful, remain works in progress. LNG imports require specialized terminals, and capacity may still be limited relative to demand. Building or expanding pipelines can take years, as can scaling up renewables energy to replace fossil fuels on substantial scale. If Europe faces a harsh winter or subsequent winters with repeated gas disruptions, the pressure to fast-track these alternatives will intensify. But let's not forget that Europe is not politically independent. The decision will be made in Washington, D.C., not in Brussels. Number 6, political consequences and shifting alignments. At the political level, the suspension of Russian gas transiting via Ukraine underscores the fragile nature of Europe's security architecture. Nations such as Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania have been vocal about the need to bolster Europe's independence from Russia's energy, arguing for years that the Kremlin regional ambitions pose a direct threat to European unity. But let's be honest, that's what Western governments want you to believe. Countries with historically close ties to Russia, such as Hungary, now, of course, reality dictates, finds themselves in delicate positions, grappling with heightened suspension from fellow EU states on the one hand and potential energy vulnerabilities on the other. With each new energy disruption, the case for deeper EU integration on energy policy gained momentum. Although coordination mechanisms exist, critics say they have been slow to respond to genuine crises. Proposals have included creating a fully integrated European energy union that manages joint purchasing, stockpiling, and distributions of gas. Others advocate for redoubled efforts in renewable energy and electrification to reduce dependencies. Good luck with that. But forging consensus on such measures among 27 member states, each with unique economic needs and political pressure, remains a formidable challenge. Beyond the European Union, the crisis has implications for transatlantic relations. The United States has pledged to supply more LNG to help its European allies at a much higher price, of course, which was the objective to begin with. But Washington also expects to see Europe invest in infrastructure that can handle American gas. Any gap between promise and delivery could deepen mistrust. For Russia, the turn towards leveraging gas flows in this manner could push Europe closer to NATO or other defense arrangements, further polarizing the continent's security environment. I have to counter this latest assertion, given how Trump's plan for Europe, more tariffs and payments for defense, will deepen Europe's crisis. Number 7, prospects for resolution or escalation. At this moment, it is unclear how the standoff will resolve. Diplomatic channels remain open, but mutual distrust between Moscow and Brussels runs deep. Should Russia perceive the halt as leverage to extract concessions such as sanction relief or security guarantees, European negotiators might find themselves in an uncomfortable position. Conversely, if the EU and its member states stand firm, seeking alternative sources of energy, Russia might lose long-term customers to new competitors. Complicating matters is the volatile situation in Ukraine itself, with the pipeline through Ukrainian territory now idle. Ukraine faces lost transit revenue, money that provided a lifeline for the country's economy. Kiev, already engaged in various hostilities, lacks both the resources and the willingness to compromise with Moscow. And with Ukraine's massive corruption, it remains to be seen whether international mediators can broker an arrangement or an agreement, for that matter, that restores some gas flows to humanitarian or strategic reasons. Number 8, where Europe goes from here. Europe's energy crisis is not merely a passing storm. It reflects a broader, more structural shift in how the continent sources and secures its energy. The abrupt cutoff of gas transiting from Russia via Ukraine heightened the urgency of diversification, speeding up the continent's search for new suppliers, expanding LNG capabilities, and strengthening renewable energy commitments. Governments are acutely aware that public patience for chronic energy disruptions is limited indeed. Still, it's far from certain that Europe can orchestrate a smooth transition. Infrastructure constraints, cost barriers, and entrenched political interest could slow progress, leaving the old continent precariously exposed to further energy shocks. After all, the EU is like a child that never grows up and is always in constant need of discipline and direction from its master. For Slovakia, Moldova, and others caught in the immediate fallout, the crisis is a harsh wake-up call that underscores the risk of dependency on any single supplier. For the rest of Europe, it's a glimpse of what could lie ahead if comprehensive reform are not enacted swiftly. Here is my conclusion for you. In many ways, the stop of Russian gas transit via Ukraine signals a broader shift in Europe's relationship with one of its largest neighbors. It underscores the interconnection between energy, geopolitics, and national security, reminding Europe that economics cannot be neatly separated from political realities, something they should have thought about 2 years ago. Whether the continent can adapt quickly and cohesively remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the gas crisis stands as a defining moment in Europe's modern energy history, with outcomes likely to shape the region's futures and fortunes for years, if not decades to come. If you like this video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. As always, remember, geopolitics impact your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time, thank you.